What do Michael Jackson, Will Smith, Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, Kendrick Lamar, and The Weeknd all have in common? One man, one visionary, one producer who didn't just witness the evolution of music, he engineered it. Quincy Jones turned a young Michael into the king of pop, launched Will Smith's career with a single handshake, and shaped the very soul of Aretha and Ray. Decades later, Kendrick and The Weeknd still echo his influence. He's worked behind the curtain for over 70 years, a silent architect of sound, culture, and history. But how deep does his impact go? And how many legends owe their success to his vision? The truth is more jaw-dropping than you think. Before Thriller became the best-selling album in music history, before the moonwalk became a cultural earthquake, there was one man behind the curtain, orchestrating it all: Quincy Jones. Michael Jackson was already famous from his Jackson 5 days, but by the late 70s, he was hungry for something more, something legendary. He didn't want to be a child star who faded with age. He wanted to become the greatest entertainer the world had ever seen. And the man who believed in that vision, who knew how to get him there, was Quincy. Their first collaboration, Off the Wall, dropped in 1979. It fused pop, funk, disco, and soul into something no one had ever heard before. Quincy called it sophisticated funk. Critics called it a masterpiece. It was the beginning of a creative explosion. But absolutely nothing could prepare the world for what came next. Thriller wasn't just an album. It was a cultural reset. Quincy brought in the best of the best. Eddie Van Halen shredded a guitar solo on Beat It. Vincent Price delivered a haunting monologue on Thriller. And every beat, bassline, and breath was painstakingly engineered for maximum impact. Quincy was obsessed with every detail. Every note had to land. Every transition had to feel like magic. The album went on to sell over 70 million copies worldwide. It won 8 Grammy Awards in one night. And it didn't just dominate charts, it tore down barriers. Thriller helped break the color line on MTV and made music videos a global art form. But behind all that success? Tension. Quincy pushed Michael hard. He wasn't afraid to challenge him, to demand more takes, better phrasing, sharper emotion. Their relationship was intense, creative, and sometimes volatile. By the time they finished Bad in 1987, the dynamic had shifted. Michael was taking more control. Quincy was ready to move on. But the legacy they left behind? Untouchable. Quincy didn't just help Michael Jackson make history, he helped him become it. And yet, even after working with the biggest star on the planet, Quincy's next move would launch an entirely different kind of icon. Quincy Jones doesn't just spot talent, he builds careers out of thin air. And no story proves that more than the rise of Will Smith. In 1990, Will Smith was broke. He'd gone from Grammy-winning rapper to nearly bankrupt after blowing through his money and racking up serious debt with the IRS. He needed a lifeline, and that lifeline was Quincy. At a party at Quincy's house, everything changed. In a bold move, Quincy told Will, "We're going to do a screen test, right here, right Hollywood studio, no casting process, just Quincy, a camera, and a gut feeling." Within minutes, Will Smith was cast as the lead in The Fresh Prince of Bellaire. The show was an instant hit, and it wasn't just funny, it was groundbreaking. As executive producer, Quincy crafted a sitcom that blended comedy with real emotional weight. The episodes tackled racism, gun violence, fatherhood, and identity, all wrapped inside one of the most iconic theme songs of all time. Will Smith became a household name, but the real genius was behind the scenes. Quincy fought to keep the show authentic. He protected its black cast and crew, made sure its cultural tone remained honest, and used the platform to speak to an entire generation. He didn't just give Will a role, he gave him a voice. And that voice carried Will Smith from sitcom star to blockbuster icon. Without Quincy, there's no Independence Day, no Men in Black, and definitely no Oscar win. He saw something in Will that no one else had, and he bet on it. But Will Smith wasn't Quincy's first discovery. Long before that, he was shaping the sound of soul and launching the voices that would define a generation. Before Quincy Jones was working with pop superstars or Hollywood royalty, he was in smoky jazz clubs, writing arrangements that would change the future of soul. One of his earliest collaborators, a blind teenager from Florida named Ray Charles. Quincy and Ray met in the early 1950s when both were just breaking into the industry. They were young, hungry, and determined to make music that didn't just entertain, but meant something. Quincy didn't just play alongside Ray. He arranged, coached, and helped mold Ray's fusion of gospel, blues, and jazz into something electric. That sound would become the foundation of soul music. Quincy once said, "Ray Charles taught me how to listen." But the truth is, they taught each other how to create. And Ray wasn't the only voice Quincy helped amplify. Years later, he crossed paths with a teenage prodigy named Aretha Franklin. While she wouldn't fully bloom until the late 60s, Quincy had already laid the groundwork. He arranged for her early performances and helped open doors few black artists could access at the time. His guidance gave her exposure to the jazz and orchestral world, something that would shape her later masterpieces. In a time when the music industry routinely shut out black talent, Quincy was forcing doors open, not just for himself, but for an entire generation. And his impact went beyond individual artists. Quincy was one of the first black arrangers to work with white orchestras, jazz ensembles, and major record labels. He didn't just blend genres, he blended audiences. That crossover appeal became the blueprint for every soul and R&B artist that followed. Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin would go on to become royalty, but Quincy Jones was the one who helped crown them. But as the decades changed, so did the sound of music, and Quincy was always one step ahead, even when hip-hop exploded onto the scene. You won't see Quincy Jones rapping. He wasn't spinning turntables or rocking oversized chains. But behind the sound of hip-hop, his fingerprints are everywhere. Quincy's catalog is one of the most sampled in the history of rap music. From Tupac's How Do You Want It to Kendrick Lamar's All Right, countless artists have pulled from his grooves, horn lines, and arrangements. Even Kanye West, known for his crate-digging genius, has repeatedly credited Quincy's productions as the gold standard for musical layering. But it goes deeper than samples. In 1989, Quincy dropped Back on the Block, a genre-defying album that brought jazz, soul, and rap together in one space, long before it was mainstream to do so. He featured Ice-T, Big Daddy Kane, and Melly Mel right alongside legends like Ella Fitzgerald and Miles Davis. It was radical, and it won the Grammy for Album of the Year. At a time when the industry still saw hip-hop as a fad, or worse, a threat, Quincy treated it with respect. He saw it for what it was, the new voice of Black America, and instead of running from it, he embraced it. But Quincy didn't just inspire with his music, he inspired with his process. His meticulous attention to detail, live instrumentation, and genre-blending arrangements became the blueprint for modern producers. The soul samples in Kanye's College Dropout, the orchestral layers in Kendrick's To Pimp a Butterfly, the throwback grooves in Anderson .Paak's tracks, all of it traces back to Quincy style. Even Dr. Dre once said, "Quincy is the master. I study his records." And today, artists like The Weeknd craft entire albums rooted in Quincy's lush, cinematic sound. The influence isn't just present, it's dominant. But Quincy wasn't content just influencing the charts. He was ready to step into the spotlight himself and show the world what he could do on his own terms.
After decades of shaping legends from the shadows, Quincy Jones finally stepped into the spotlight and made it look effortless. Most producers never become stars, but Quincy, he flipped the script. In 1981, he released The Dude, an album packed with smooth grooves, big-name collaborations, and chart-topping hits like I Know Corrida and Just Once. It was Quincy's sound, jazzy, funky, lush, now front and center. The album earned him 12 Grammy nominations and 3 wins. And that was just the beginning. Years later, in 1995, he dropped Q's Juke Joint, a celebration of everything he'd built. The album wasn't just a nostalgia trip. It brought together generations of artists: Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, Brandy, Babyface, Bono, and even rappers like Coolio and Queen Latifah. No one else had the power or respect to unite names like that on one project. But the awards told the real story. To date, Quincy Jones has won 28 Grammy Awards, more than any living artist, and has been nominated a staggering 80 times. That's not just success, that's domination. And yet through it all, Quincy never chased the spotlight. His albums weren't ego trips, they were showcases, platforms to lift others, celebrations of music, the power to bring people together across genre, race, and generation. He once said, "I never made music for money or fame. I made it because I loved it." And it shows. His solo projects proved that a producer could be more than just the guy behind the board. He could be the architect of culture. But Quincy's genius didn't stop with albums. He had his sights on something even bigger: the silver screen. By the time Quincy Jones had conquered the music industry, most people would have called it a career. Quincy called it a warm-up. He set his sights on Hollywood and once again broke new ground. In the 1960s, Quincy became one of the first black composers to score major films, a feat nearly unheard of at the time. His early work included The Pawnbroker in 1964 and In the Heat of the Night in 1967. Films that didn't just need music, they needed mood, tension, and soul. Quincy delivered all of that and more. But he didn't stop there. In 1985, Quincy produced The Color Purple, a powerful drama directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey. It went on to receive 11 Academy Award nominations. And while the film was groundbreaking in many ways, so was Quincy's presence behind the scenes. As producer, he was one of the few black power players in Hollywood at the time, and he made sure that voices from the black community weren't just featured on screen, but heard in every part of the process. Then came television. We already saw him give life to The Fresh Prince of Bellaire, but that was just part of the story. Quincy Jones Entertainment Company was one of the few black-owned companies producing major network shows. He created space for diverse voices and gave young black actors, writers, and directors opportunities the industry rarely offered. He even co-founded Vibe magazine in the 90s, a cultural touchstone that spotlighted the voices of hip-hop and R&B in an era when mainstream media still didn't fully understand them. In both film and television, Quincy was never just a participant. He was a disruptor, a creator, a force. And while his influence reshaped the past, his fingerprints are all over today's music too, including some of the biggest artists of our generation. You don't have to dig through the past to see Quincy Jones's influence. Just turn on the radio. Today's biggest stars, from The Weeknd to Kendrick Lamar, Bruno Mars to Billie Eilish, are building their sound on the foundation Quincy laid decades ago. Take Kendrick Lamar. His cinematic, layered production on To Pimp a Butterfly drew straight from Quincy's playbook: live horns, sweeping arrangements, and seamless fusion of jazz, soul, and hip-hop. Kendrick even said in interviews that he studied Quincy's work while making the album, calling him one of the architects of storytelling through sound. Then there's The Weeknd. His After Hours and Dawn FM albums ooze with Quincy's DNA: funky bass lines, dramatic strings, and grooves straight out of the 80s. And in 2021, The Weeknd made it official. He invited Quincy to narrate a spoken-word interlude on Dawn FM. In the track, Quincy opens up about childhood trauma, emotion, and music. It's a raw, reflective moment and a direct passing of the torch. And what about Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak? Their Silk Sonic project could practically be called a love letter to Quincy. From the vintage production to the silky smooth vocals, every track echoes Quincy's mastery of rhythm and style. Even the way they perform, slick suits, choreographed moves, tight instrumentation, it's pure Quincy. Modern producers like Mark Ronson and Phineas have also praised Quincy's ability to blend soul, pop, and orchestration without ever sounding dated. They study his transitions, his layering, his restraint, his boldness. Quincy didn't just influence genres, he invented the standard. And even now, artists chase that level of perfection, trying to create something timeless just like he did. But for Quincy Jones, legacy isn't just about the past. Even in his 90s, he's still shaping the future. Following his passing, the world lost more than a producer. It lost a visionary who shaped the sound of multiple generations. Quincy Jones didn't just create music, he crafted culture, opened doors, and left behind a blueprint that modern artists still follow. From Michael Jackson to Kendrick Lamar, his influence lives on. And if you want more deep dives into music's greatest legends, don't forget to subscribe.